Welcome back, America. The United States Supreme Court is the only court actually mentioned in the Constitution of the United States. These are big appointments, lifetime appointments. The nation suffers mightily if the wrong people are on the court. It does pretty well if the right people are on the court. And Joe Biden limited his choices to African-American women who are on courts, and that's a limited number of individuals. And he chose the most radical. The left-wing groups and dark money got behind the candidacy of Judge Jackson. And one of the great legal minds in this country who serves in the Senate is Ted Cruz. He was a clerk for Chief Justice William Rehnquist. He's argued cases before the Supreme Court. Alan Dershowitz, no slouch, says that he is the brightest student he ever had. He's a good friend of mine. Senator Cruz, welcome. You're on the Senate Judiciary Committee. You questioned this nominee. Were you impressed with her?
Well, so I've known Judge Jackson for 30 years. We were in law school together. We were both on the law review at Harvard. Personally speaking, she's very bright. She's very charming. She's very affable. But her substantive record, I mean, you used a word a minute ago, radical, and I think that's exactly right. Her substantive record is dramatically to the left. And if she is confirmed, she will be the most liberal justice of all nine. She'll be the most liberal justice to have ever served on the U.S. Supreme Court. And that will have enormous consequences across the entire range. It'll have enormous consequences for free speech. It'll have enormous consequences for religious liberty. It'll have enormous consequences for the Second Amendment. Her record shows a consistent left-wing radical approach. But I think there was no area where her record was more troubling than crime. And her record on crime in particular, she came out of law school and she clerked for Justice Breyer on the Supreme Court. And she became a federal public defender. And you and I have both known public defenders, and there are public defenders, people go and do that because their heart is with criminal defendants. Their heart is with the murderers, with the criminals, and that's who they're rooting for. A lot of the same reason people go become a prosecutor, because they want to lock up bad guys. Public defenders often have a natural inclination in the direction of the criminal. And I got to say that inclination was not just while she was a public defender, but she carried it onto the bench. When she became a criminal judge, you know, my office did an analysis of her criminal sentences versus every other federal judge in the country. Her average sentence for all criminal cases, 2015 to 2019, was 29.9 months. The average nationally is 45.1 months. So she is 34% less than the national average for all criminal cases. But I'll tell you, Mark, it gets even more concerning when you deal with sex crimes. And she's got 3 decades of advocating for lenient treatment for sex offenders. And in particular, her record dealing with defendants who were guilty of possession or distribution of child pornography, her record is no less than astonishing. Over and over again, she had 10 different cases in front of her over her time as a judge, dealing with people who, all of whom pleaded guilty to possession or distribution of child pornography. And over and over and over again, 100% of the time, when she had sentencing discretion, she gave them a slap on the wrist. She gave them much, much lower than the sentencing guidelines. She gave them much, much lower than the prosecutor asked for. And again, these are statistics my office pulled together. Her average sentence for someone who pleaded guilty to possession of child pornography was 29.2 months. The national average is 68 months. That means she sentenced 57% below the national average. And I'll tell you, it's even more stunning for the people who pleaded guilty to distribution of child porn. The national average is 135 months. If you're distributing child porn, that is a bad crime. 135 months is the national average. Her average is 71.9. So it's half, 47% less. And there's a mandatory minimum of 60 months for the distribution of child porn. So she couldn't go below 60 months under the law. This pattern is really disturbing. And what it will mean if she's confirmed as a justice, I think we will see for 30 or 40 years a justice over and over again voting to release murderers, over and over again voting to overturn criminal convictions, over and over again voting to put loopholes in place that benefit violent criminals and sexual predators, and that I think is really disturbing.
And rule against death penalty cases in the states, and lenient on violent illegal immigrants. And you're exactly right. She's totally predictable. She's the hard left of the judiciary in this country. And yet, Ted Cruz, I haven't heard a single Democrat senator speak out against her. In fact, I hear the so-called moderates, Manchin has endorsed her.
Yeah.
Even here, a couple of Republican senators are on the fence, and Susan Collins has said she's met her, she likes her, she did extended interviews, so she's going to vote for her. Given her record, given that she's an extremist, and she is an extremist,
Yeah.
don't we, as the public who have to live with the results of these decisions and live with the results of these justices, have a right to conclude that these senators, whomever they are, who vote for her, are weak on these very same subjects?
It's the only outcome you can come to. And you know, the last book I wrote was entitled One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. And you and I did an entire show talking about that book, One Vote Away, and it went to #1 on the Amazon bestseller list as we discussed it. That book, every chapter talks about a different constitutional right. So there's a chapter on free speech, a chapter on the Second Amendment, a chapter on religious liberty. There's a chapter on crime and the death penalty. And what the book does is it tells war stories. So it's not an academic book. It's telling firsthand accounts of litigating some of the biggest landmark cases in the country. And what is striking, and you know this, but it's important for everyone to know this, that over and over again, the big landmark cases are 5-4. We are one vote away on issue after issue after issue from losing our fundamental rights. Heller versus District of Columbia, the landmark case upholding the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. That was 5-4. I think the odds are 100% that Judge Jackson would vote to overturn Heller. The death penalty repeatedly, we've seen activist justices vote to overturn the death penalty. I think the odds are 100% that Judge Jackson would vote to overturn the death penalty. And at the end of the day, when you have senators who say they don't support abolishing the police, when you vote to confirm justices that will release violent criminals and endanger our communities, then you are supporting abolishing the police and repealing the Second Amendment and taking away our free speech rights and taking away our religious liberty rights. You are supporting that kind of radical agenda.
And, of course, these absurdity of not willing to define a woman, that tells you where she's going to turn out on all these Title IX cases. The absurdity of her pretending not to know what critical race theory is when she wrote about it, when she talked about it, when she promoted it. It's a strange thing. If you embrace critical race theory, you cannot embrace the Constitution of the United States. Ted, I want to thank you for being one of the leading voices, if not the leading voice, in the United States Senate in opposition to this nomination. And on behalf of the Constitution, my friend, thanks for coming. God bless you.
Thank you, Mark.